Well, hey, everybody, we're so glad you're here today. And I don't think our guest today needs any introduction. Henry Cloud has been somebody that's helped more people than I know with dealing with their own life and with ministry and with business. And it really doesn't matter what your background is if you're listening or watching today. As I've heard Henry say, if you're human, this is applicable. I guess if you're not, then maybe tune out. But Henry, thanks for making time for us. I know you're busy.
Well, it's good to be with you. It's a funny time.
It, well,
Strange.
and it's funny that we were talking before recording that here in Houston, where oil is less than $1 right now, it's actually less than zero right now. There are some people with time on their hands, but we've been crazy busy, and I can't imagine what it's like for you when people are trying to figure out their boundaries. I mean,
Yeah.
it's got to be a nutty time, right?
Well, it's a first of all, it's extreme. I don't know, and I've been this busy, like literally around the clock for the last 6 weeks. Primarily in the field of leadership. I work with CEOs mostly and their teams and companies and organizations, and the it's it you know leaders have found themselves right now, in order to lead something, if you're a pastor or you're even the CEO of a global company, you are now a pastor or a CEO, or maybe you're a CFO or whatever it is you do. And if that's going to work, you're also a psychologist, because you've got to lead now, and you've got to organize activities and people around trying to get their brains working again. Because in a crisis, what happens is the brain goes on a reset, and it's not normal. And we can get into the specifics of that, but the successful leaders that I work with now I mean, I want to give them a degree and a title, because they're having to be good psychologists.
Wow. Well, I was looking. We have 7 children, 2 of whom are out in the work world. So we
If
have
I,
five
if
kids.
I had 7 children, I would need 7 psychologists.
Well, that's kind of why we're here today. I'm going to lie down on the couch in a minute, and yeah, no, my wife is now a university professor, a high school administrator, middle school principal, and elementary school, and all the
Yeah,
rest.
the good part of that for us. So we have 2 girls, 17 and 19, and the 19-year-old was a sophomore at Clemson, and she had to come home. They shut down school 7 or 8 weeks ago, and then it's senior year for my younger daughter, and to have them home, it's just been the biggest bonus. And we have actually found this to be the richest family time that we've had in years. It's
I
been
would
great.
say the same thing. Our devotional time is better. It's forcing me to do more work on devotionals for the kids. And we're living in places like the Psalms and Jesus' words about peace and that sort of thing. And the kids, with this many people, we kind of have to function like a military base. So everybody's learning how to sew. They're learning how to do a dinner.
Good.
It's funny, when we first started the whole routine, the 6, 7 weeks ago now, uh, I think our teenage boy was pretty sure he'd been assigned to Auschwitz. Uh, yeah, I have no freedom, and there's a routine, and I felt kind of sorry for him. I don't know what I'd have done if our teenage boy with all this and spend this much time with parents, but I did do a little research for a blog post I was writing, and I looked at what did people in solitary confinement that survived have in common, and what I found over and over and over was they went back to, well, I formed a routine. I formed a discipline. And I just thought of that, and I actually thought of you. Thought, where are you seeing, what's the psychology of what's happening to us as we're quarantining? I know you've done a webinar on that, but like, what can we learn about boundaries and routine and discipline to keep us sane in the middle of this?
Yeah, well, there actually is. There are some things. There's a set of things that you really have to do, because there is a psychology to this. Let me start by putting it this way. The your the way we operate life is your mind makes mental maps. Okay, so when you go through the day, or when you negotiate a relationship or your business, your mind has maps for how that works, and you built that up over experience and a bunch of stuff. And so, I mean, I always say, like, if you're walking to the fridge, you know, to, make a sandwich, your mind has a map of how you do that. And you get up and you kind of go about it through your patterns. Well, if somebody threw a couch out in the middle of your path, your mind, because it has a pattern, knows how to get there, your mind would register that as an error. So all of a sudden it goes, what? And everything gets activated for a split second. So the cortisol systems, the adrenal systems, all of that spike. And for the moment, depending on how long, your real brain just shuts down because you got to, you're on fight or flight mode. You've heard that term. But then you assess it. Who did that? And you resolve the error. You move it, and you walk around, and you're back to normal. Okay, that's the way we negotiate. It's sort of like when a car pulls out in front of you. But you get a crisis like this, or I do a lot of work on Wall Street in 2008. That crisis, 9/11, same thing in leadership. You get a crisis that a leader or an individual, we can't fix it. We can't move the couch and get back to normal. So what happens is your entire system gets activated, and now it's spiking, and all sorts of stuff begins to happen in that spike. And when it's prolonged like this, what every individual has got to do is you got to reboot the system, and you got to get it back down to normal. And there are some key things that leaders and just 15-year-olds, all of us need, because we all have the same brains, that we all have to do to get the system back to normal so we can function in our highest ways. Literally, research has shown that in a crisis, somebody's IQ can drop 30 points.
I don't have 30 to give.
I don't have 30 to give either. And think about, all those executives out there. You hired people, you're paying them for that big brain they got. You ought to cut their pay right now because you're not getting all the IQ points. But there are some things in the psychology of this we can do. And I'll give the list real quickly, and then,
Sure.
then you can unpack it. If you think of, I like to think of the way Jesus put this was if you build a house on a rock, right? And then the winds come, the pandemic comes, and then it's gonna be okay. It's gonna get wet and all that, but it's gonna be okay, and it's gonna make it. It's gonna be fine. But if you build it on the sand and the pandemic comes, then it's gonna crack. It's talking about the structure of certainly the foundation of him and our relationship in him. But if you go back to the passage, it's in the context of, he says, if you do his words. In other words, if we're building the construction of who we are on not just, okay, I have a relationship with God, and a lot of people try to do that, say, well, my position is in Christ, and they'll claim this kind of like, de facto statement, but they really haven't built the structure of how they operate, how they think, how they feel, the way they relate, all of that on his words. It's sort of like that phrase, you'll know the truth and the truth shall set you free. And everybody says, okay, we got to learn the truth. That's not what the passage says. What the passage says is, if you walk in my ways, if you hold to my teachings, then you will know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. And it's a process orientation of building our lives in a certain way. So let's talk about the architecture of this house for a moment. The way a human is constructed is like, you build a house. What do? The first thing you do is pour a slab, and there's a foundation. The foundation of a human being is their relationships, okay? Our connectedness to God and to each other form the foundation and the sturdiness of who we are as people. You take a baby, what's the first year of life about? It's not about learning how to play softball. It's about learning how to connect and trust and have an emotional investment so they can find security. And then they take that all the way to the tomb, from the womb to the tomb. And we know that geriatrics who go through a heart attack or a stroke, you put them in a group where they're connected, they're processing that illness, and you give them all the best medical care. You take another group, give them all the best medical care, and they're not connected and processing it. This group has way higher instances of second heart attack and stroke. And it's all the way through everything. Okay. So a pandemic, what does it do to your connectedness? It obliterates it, right? I mean, the people you normally see, the best friend at work, the cubicle next door, the one you go to lunch with, you know, your small group you meet with,
Yeah.
that's gone unless you recreate it. Now, we can talk about some ways to do that. But if people aren't focusing on making sure that, like a dosage level of an antibiotic, you're not doing the hangouts with the right people in the right ways and all of that. And as an executive, I was on the phone with the CEO of a global company 2 days ago that all of you would know. And he said the best thing he did, 1 hour, 1 hour Zoom call with his entire executive team every morning at the same time.
Wow.
Every morning at the same time. And then he has an individual one-on-one call at some point with all of them, and he's getting them to work that down throughout the organization. Okay, that's the connection piece. Number 2, after a foundation, what do? You frame the house. Okay, so a frame is a structure. God has built our minds and our entire emotional, physiological, neurological, biological, psychological, every other logical system to operate in a sense of structure. It's the routines and the structure that make us kind of calm down. You take everybody knows this. You walk into a second grade class and the substitute teachers there doesn't provide any, they're all over the place. Well, principal walks in, all of a sudden takes charge, just like you said, with your kid, take charge. What happens? They calm down. Kids with good boundaries, they calm down. You put an acting out adolescent in a treatment center where they finally get some structure, the acting out calms down. Okay. So the pandemic, it does away with our routines. You don't have your routine. You get up in the morning, you usually drive here, you stop at Starbucks, you go to your office, you say hi to Susie at that desk as you walk by, you got your meeting and your review and you got the sales call and all of this. All of that's gone. And people are staring at white space on their calendars. And that's driving them crazy, or it will after a while. It feels good for a few days, right? So what's really, really important, and if you're a leader, really important to make sure you're creating structure for people and individuals.
Does structure have to be set by, so this is a debate between my wife and me. I think our brains just work differently. Her structure has to be driven by calendar. Like she blocks her calendar every night for the next.
It's not driven by, it's not driven by calendar. It's driven by her, and she's using a calendar.
Fair enough. I'm driven by a punch list. So I have my 7 things I'm going to get done each day, and they're usually large energy block things. So is there one that's better than the other, or is it whichever one works for you, or are we both doing it wrong?
This is a really, really, really important point, because you're talking about 2 things. And that's why you guys are arguing and you're not getting it resolved, because you're not even talking about the same thing. Okay. One of the things you're talking about is structure. So a routine, structure has to do with time and place, basically. Okay. So to structure some things, and people need different, and like you're saying, people need different amounts of that. It just depends on where the anxiety is. The disorder of structure we call OCD, and what people are doing then is they're creating micro little structures. I can't go down the whole sidewalk. I got to count each crack, right? So they're trying to bind anxiety. All right. So one of the things we're talking about is time and place, but for you, dollar in. We'll talk to her about this plan. For you, you can have, okay, I got stuff to do, which is issue number 2. But the structure I just need to know I got my morning to do that. And you block out your morning to do that, right? And that's enough for you. She may need it in tighter blocks, all right? But everybody needs some sort of structure. And what I'm finding is when people who even kind of don't normally think they would be this anal, get up at the same time, okay? Do your quiet time or your workout or whenever you want to do that, whatever, but assign some times. And even if you don't want hour blocks, have a block. If you say, I need some white space to cover a lot of stuff. Fine, just block it in that's white space from 9 to noon, because it adds, your brain knows that. And then you got to have a quitting time. One of the things I do every morning is I get up and I do my regular routines and I go to the office. I'm in my study, say, bye guys, go to the office. And up until 12, we meet in the kitchen around noon. Everybody makes their sandwich together or whatever. I go back to work about 5:30 or so. If I can, I don't have another podcast or whatever, I'll cut it off. And then I take an hour in there where I don't want to talk to anybody. Okay. Because I got to have that to clear my head. And then we meet for prep and dinner. And then we have game night every night.
Oh, wow.
After dinner. Okay. So that's the structure piece. Now, if you're a leader, here's what you can do with your team. You got the structure of the times. That's important. Your regular, meeting time or whatever. But you can structure this with a few high priorities, okay? Simple and less and short term, but you're getting them structured to, see, they got to wake up in the morning and know, what am I going to do today that moves the needle? Right? So a few priorities, and then structure the roles and responsibilities of each other, okay? Short term, maybe it's until tomorrow, right? And then also build in the accountability for that, not in a police way, but okay, tomorrow we're going to check in and go over this and see how everybody did and regroup and see if it worked, and then we're going to adapt. But what you're doing is you're building some structure to this, okay? That's the second component after connection. The third one, and this is the second issue you and your wife are arguing about. The third one is control. See, humans were meant to be connected, to have boundaries, to operate in. And God gave us all sorts of structures. Think about days and nights and weeks and a Sabbath and months and seasons. And in fact, back to the time thing, we don't even let any good shrink is not going to let a CEO or an executive or a salesperson who's got bipolar illness or some kind of mood disorder, we don't let them cross time zones, because God has built in circadian rhythms to your brain. And if you know people that travel a lot international, they get really screwed up if they don't watch it. So this thing about God building in structures and seasons and all of that, that's part of the created order, and we need it. But the third thing is control. Every human was meant to have control. You are a control freak as a human. There's a reason for that. You've got to have a sense of potency, okay? God is omnipotent, omnipotent, but you've got to be potent. In other words, you got to have a sense of being able to have what the Bible calls self-control that drives a sense of fruitfulness or an outcome, all right? So what you're talking about, you got to have your punch list. What you've defined there is not so much the structure of the schedule, because you're able to do that probably in your own head, but you've defined the punch list. That's the activities that you have you have control of, that you know are going to drive the result. All right. Now that is huge. I mean, what we know about, if you take a toddler and you hook their brain up to a brain scan, and you get the little pegs thing with the hammer, and you go, why? And you're hitting them, and the toddler's watching, their brain's kind of doing this, and there's a little activity as they watch you do it. Then you take the hammer and you hand it to the kid. You say, now you do it. Now they got control of it. Their brain goes crazy. It's firing on all cylinders. And God made you to have control of something. We take geriatrics, and we go through the nursing home in the system. If you're a consultant with a healthcare system and you want to drive up immune system functioning, cognitive functioning, moods, resistance to illness in even really old people, what do? Increase choice, increase control. You give them a choice of their menu. You give them a choice of their activities. You give them a choice of where they want to sit. And we try to build in as much autonomy and choice to the system. all the way down to your management team.
Huh.
See, what you got to do is define the boundaries, set them free, have them figure out the activities, and then let them go drive what they can control. As a leader and every human, here's what we got to do. You got to make two lists. One is all the crap that you can't control right now, which is a big list, right? Can't control when the government's going to open this thing up, can't control how fast it spreads, we can't control when the vaccine comes, can't control the markets, can't control the interest rate, can't control the price of oil in Houston, can't control my donors, whether or not they got money to give to the church, and write all that down in a column called the things I can't control. And do this with your team. What's affecting us right now that we can't control? Write it down, set a timer. Worry yourself sick over it for about 10 minutes. Let the timer go ding, and then say, okay, this is stuff we can do nothing about. We're going to surrender this to God. And now let's move over to column 2. Because here's what we do have control of. Now, William, I'm seeing people when they get in that mindset, you see the same thing I saw in '08 on Wall Street. That when they get out of worrying about all the stuff that's affecting them, they have no control over, and they're saying, what can we do? You are seeing incredible innovation, incredible spikes in mood, spikes in focus, all of that, because they're coming up with activities that actually will drive the needle. That brings a human back to life.
That's been so true for us just in our experience. I mean, we help Christian organizations find their staff. People hire us to do searches. People aren't hiring right now, so they're not hiring search firms right now. So like, we can't, so somehow either intuitively or just by a gift of God, I said to our team, all right, fine, finish the searches we have. And for right now, serve, don't sell. And I didn't realize what was happening, but when I said that, all of a sudden we found ways to serve our clients, and it was something they could do. And I've never been more fulfilled at work. Wow, this is amazing how our team's working together. I'm hearing all these.
As you serve those clients, they're going, wow, you guys could help me in other ways. I mean, that's the way it works, right?
Well, it's just we're living out just by good fortune exactly what you're saying. So this is hitting home for me big. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really amazing the innovation that I'm seeing. Not only churches but companies do in reinventing themselves. I mean, it's seeing like new product lines, new way of distributing things, new ways of doing marketing, and I would think, I'm not in your business, but with your clients who they're not hiring, but what if you said, one of the things that would be, you're not hiring now, but this would be a good time to actually really, really start defining what are the key competencies that are needed, and do you have the right seats? And so when you're looking for the person, even what we're looking for, and maybe this leads to a more efficient reorg, and all there's a lot of stuff that can be done right now.
Well, you've spoken at Leadership Summit a number of times, I know, and I was interviewing Jimmy Miato not too long ago, who I assume you know, and he said, we wouldn't have the summit as it exists today had 9/11 not happened. 9/11 happened, and we realized nobody's going to get on a plane and come to Chicago. What are we going to do? And they come up with the sites. And if you've seen the Leadership Summit, then it's all about multi-site. So I'm seeing that. I'm seeing churches are asking us, what are the new roles on staff that we haven't thought of? And so we've been researching. And I've got to tell you, Henry, maybe I'm just the eternal optimist, but I've heard no one ask this question. When in human history has the entire global healthcare system been focused on solving one singular problem? Like, never happened. We go to cancer and heart disease and lupus and this and those things are all important, but like, I'm confident that we'll have solutions quicker than we think because people are forced to work together and innovate in ways we hadn't thought. But now answer me this, and then I want to get to a really cool thing you're doing. For me, I'm helping people identify new hires, and it might be in schools, and it might be in churches, and it might be like, talk to leaders right now. When you're hiring for your next round of hires across industry, what are some of the new skills that are going to be necessary in this world that we're entering that will not be the same as the previous world?
Well, I mean, we already know this, but now we like really know it. And that is, you've just got to not just our people that are tech savvy. There's a difference in being tech savvy and familiar and a user of technology to being a real whatever that other level would be. The other level is they don't just know how to use stuff that exists, they think in ways of how to make uses for things that don't even exist. And there's all sorts of new stuff. I mean, there's a lot of, and it's not just an age thing, it's kind of a style thing. There are some people that they just don't even think about anything that doesn't involve technology.
Yeah.
And so that would be one of the things really, really big that I would be looking for. But the other thing is this, that there are people that when they think of growing something, they think there's two aspects to this. One of the things is they think of the quantitative aspect of how you grow sales or whatever it is, and you'll listen. And if you listen, you'll be hearing a quantitative way of thinking that is incremental. Okay, we're here, we want to get from here, and get from there, and get from there.
Oh, wow.
Okay, right now the door is open for 10x.
Wow.
And I would want people, right, we're doing a thing called Churches that Heal right now. That's a big initiative. Most of the big church organizations we're partnering with in this, and we're seeing, when we started to work on this about a year ago, it's to come alongside churches and help them be equipped, soup to nuts, to deal with the mental health crisis in America. That was the vision, to make the church a place where hurting people can run to instead of run away from. And we knew we also got to start with the staff. There's so much burnout and hurting, pastors and all of that, that we needed to start there. So it includes that and the community all the way to the, individuals. But when we were planning this, we knew that there's a big need out there that we need to go help with. Okay, so this pandemic comes, and now the numbers that we're trying to get our heads around about how we serve, it's more than 10x.
It's geometric.
This pandemic has created for every organization, every ministry, every business, there are needs that we haven't even recognized yet that are waiting to be met and waiting to be served. So I would be looking for people that are not thinking in yesterday's ways quantitatively, but also qualitatively. They're not glued to some model. You're going to see tomorrow, you're going to see it's going to look like this. This is the way we used to be. Well, there's some things that are going to go with us, but a bunch of stuff's not. Of stuff's not. Wow. I mean, just take how many people are going to be when we open back up, whatever that means or looks like. How many people are going to be looking at every single meeting they have to do? My clients are all over the country. Most of them come to Beverly Hills because they want to get out of the weather and they like it here. But a lot of times I have to go there, or if I speak. How many people now are going to take every single meeting and immediately in their head is going to come the question, should we Zoom that or should I get on a plane?
Right.
I mean, that's just one example.
Right.
We're going to rethink this whole thing.
Never mind I want to talk about churches that heal, because the first thing God that I read, I love the way you talked about God created patterns. It's the first thing he did was create order and patterns. And I use that all the time, particularly when I'm talking to preachers that go too long. He creates a lot of these.
My dad at our church in Mississippi where I grew up, when it was a denomination, so you know, you get a new pastor every handful of years, and so the new one would come and he'd say, "I'm gonna just tell you, here's a definition of a good sermon. It's one that ends 2 minutes before 12 because I got to beat the Baptists to lunch. Don't want to go too long, right?"
That's right. That's right. Well,
I heard another great one yesterday.
yeah.
The Baptists are really loving this whole time period because now they got to wear a mask to the liquor store.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
that's
you're recognized.
old, you know, Protestants don't acknowledge Mary as the Queen of Heaven, and Methodists don't acknowledge Presbyterian belief of predestination, and Baptists don't acknowledge one another in the liquor store. So
That's right. So now, hey, we love you, Baptists. We know.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. My parents were Baptist and Catholic, so it's yeah. Well, so right after creating all these patterns, God's, you know, He said, "I created light and it was good. I created animals, it was good, and this was good. I created humans, it was very good." First curse He gives in the Bible: it's not good for man to be alone.
That's right.
And so I'm guessing this churches that heal thing, like the need is more, there's probably more mental health issue going on right now than there was 7 weeks ago. And
No doubt about that.
I mean, talk to us a little bit about what you're trying to get done there. What are the needs you're seeing there? And then some really practical things that a leader right now today can do to start to address what their business or their school or their church might be going through with mental health issues.
Yeah, one of the things that we know already is true. There's a lot of research going on in this. All right, there, you know, there's metrics that we're looking at already, and the calls to suicide hotlines. You know, the boom in that, for example, the amount of liquor that's being purchased. You know, there's a lot of things that we're seeing that, you know, are showing, you know, people are looking right now, they're looking for some kind of help and they're looking for some way to medicate themselves. And so broadly speaking, what this means is that the church has incredible a call and an opportunity if they just know what to do and not be afraid of it. Part of the vision behind Churches That Heal was my life calling in this area has been to help people understand there is no division between what we're called emotional problems versus a spiritual problem. Okay, you know, when I first started in this field, it was the integration of psychology and theology. That never made any sense to me because there's no such thing as an emotional problem versus a spiritual problem. Now, what we've done is we moralized everything so wrongly that we think somebody's being bad. Well, that's a spiritual problem because you're not praying enough and this, that, and the other, and you're not, you know, there's something, you know, God's good, you're bad, try harder, and that's a spiritual problem, right? Well, that's what Job's friends said to him. If you listen to Job's friends' counsel, it's like a walk through a Christian bookstore. It is. Job, you wouldn't be suffering if you prayed more, if you knew God's precepts, if you trusted in Him, if you got the sin out of your life, if you let your righteousness be your guard, all of this. And God came and spanks him in the end, gives all the cows to Job and said, you know, He told him the truth about this. But the reality is that the things that cause emotional problems should be the warp and the woof of spiritual formation itself. And so what I've tried to do in Churches That Heal is take a very simple model of how churches can, just in the formation of what are very, very biblical New Testament processes that we are commanded to be doing as a body, right? That if we do these things, you will see huge impacts in depression, anxiety, and addictions, and panic disorder, and relationship problems, and all of this, if we just know the issues to work on. And so what Churches That Heal does is it's a design for a model for them to start addressing all those issues. And, you know, real quickly, they're going to fall in 4 categories. One is people are either connected well or they're emotionally detached or isolated. You can be in a marriage and not be connected and be very alone. So there are things that churches can do that can invite people and usher them and spiritually form them to being the kind of people that do get vulnerable to where they can be connected and have this isolation transformed. That's what Jesus said, I came to seek, to look for, and to heal, to save that which was lost. Lost means broken in the Greek. It doesn't mean God couldn't find them. Oh, where are the humans? I lost them. I think they're over there by the keys. No, it means broken, right? And so to get them connected and talking about things that actually transform emotional states inside of them. The second thing is to get back and control their lives. How do you build a person? First year of life, they learn to connect. Second year is boundaries. You learn to say no and hear no. And a lot of people are suffering because they don't have the biblical fruit of self-control. They're other controlled. They're manipulated. They can't stand up and set limits. They don't know that the Christian faith tells you to not take abuse. A lot of them, I got to be loving and I got to be forgiving. Of course you do. But you go to Matthew 18 and where it says you're supposed to bind this stuff. That's not about demons. That's a process of setting limits with people that are sinning against you.
Wow.
That's where the whole binding passage comes from. You go confront them, that doesn't work. Like Proverbs says, stop wasting your breath. Get somebody to go talk to them with you if you're being abused or manipulated, and then you have an intervention. And then finally say, look, if you don't get sober, I can't be with you. Whatever you bind is going to be bound, or you're going to let it run free throughout your family. Well, a lot of people, they've never been taught boundaries. They're being manipulated, they're being controlled, all of that stuff. And their relationships are suffering because of it, as well as their mental health. The third thing is they don't know how to process the negative things that happen in life. And they either have diseases of perfectionism, critical voices and all the stuff that cognitive therapists work on, all this negative stuff in their head of that, anything imperfect about me I can't deal with, right? And so I get depressed over and the doctrine of forgiveness, everything in the Bible that teaches us how to grieve. We've lost the spiritual process of grieving, which heals everything in the universe almost. That's an exaggeration, but Solomon said in Ecclesiastes 7, he said, it is better to go in the house of grief than the house of pleasure because a sad face can make a heart happy. Okay, that's Freud's initial discovery about depression. Going to the house of pleasure, right? What do people do when they're in pain? Instead of processing how they feel, they go drink. They go to the house of pleasure. They go gamble, or they go on the web and look at internet porn. Let's have some pleasure so I don't feel this. Versus having places where they can process their woundedness and hurts. The gospel commands us to do this.
Wow.
And bring what's in the darkness to the light, and confess your faults with one another so that you may be healed. All the way through the New Testament are these metabolic processes that are part of discipleship that will heal these emotional problems. And then the fourth thing is, we got a lot of people running around that are over 18 years old that are children, and that's an oxymoron. Galatians 4 says, when you were a child, you were under guardians and managers until the date set forth by the Father. And then we have a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah or a coming to age something. And now the father looks at the kid and says, you're one of us. Pay your own bills, right? and not only that, they don't try to manage them and control them. Well, some people never grow up. They never find their own talents and abilities. And they go sit around an executive team and everybody's an adult and they're feeling like a kid and they have anxiety and stress and, no, what's my boss going to think of me? And all of this kind of stuff. And they've never really grown up. And that's the biblical doctrine of authority and siblinghood under God. Jesus said in Matthew 23, don't call anyone on earth your rabbi, your leader, your teacher, for you're all brothers. People don't have psychological siblinghood with other adults. A whole host of clinical problems come from being under judgment with other humans and people pleasing and all that. The gospel addresses all of this stuff. We just need a structure and the tools to do it. And that's what Churches That Heal does.
I remember an old guy I was interviewing in a church when I was serving as a senior pastor, and I said we were talking about verses that get misappropriated in the Bible. So it was a long conversation.
It's a long list.
And he said, I know God hates the proud. He said, but I don't like that verse that says, don't think more highly of yourself than you ought, because it ought to be followed with a person saying, but don't think less of yourself than you ought. And that's the fourth.
Exactly. And there is a verse that says that. It says it right there in that same passage. But see, this is what Christians do. I mean, my hair's going to catch on fire if I think about this too long. It's like the truth shall set you free. Well, read the whole passage. And that passage right there in Romans 12, don't think more highly of yourself than you ought. What does it say right after that? You never hear that. It says, but each one shall have a sane estimation of themselves, a sober estimation, which means, boy, you want to relieve some emotional problems. How many people are on what could be an incredible path to high performance? Okay, they're comparing themselves to, Bezos or somebody, right? Or some high achiever, some mentor, or somebody. They're comparing themselves to them, and they're just starting. So don't think more highly of yourself than you ought is not a smack against arrogance only. It's a saying, dude, come on. Why do you think you should be able to do that right now? You're just starting. What an incredible grace verse, right?
Well, why do you think you should be the doormat of every relationship?
Exactly. Or why do you think, to the flip side of this, why do you think you couldn't do that? Why do you think success isn't for you? Where'd you get that idea?
Yeah. Well, it's a fascinating conversation. If you look historically, I almost did a PhD in the history of doctrine, which is the weirdest PhD to ever do. There are only a few programs, but it really, if you want to know the future, look to the past. And I think it's true for human behavior. And I think one of the things we're going to see coming out of this is a renewed need for the church to focus on body, mind, and soul, and not just soul, to really get their mind around, we believe in the resurrection of the body, not just something that floats away after you're done with your current emotional state. And I think this Churches That Heal, I mean, I could be wrong, but it sounds to me like if I'm a pastor right now, I'm thinking, okay, I am in big trouble because my congregation just figured out I can Netflix Stephen Furtick or Judd Wilhite or Chris Hodges or the best preachers in the world. Why would they come listen to me? I think churches are going to have a new, a renewed look at their value proposition, and it's going to be highly localized and highly individual, highly focused on an individual's holistic healing that can't happen over Netflix preacher. So I'm assuming that Churches That Heal is a program that churches can sign up for. I mean, we've got a bunch of links we're going to send out to everybody on the email list. There's probably a quick link, like a domain name.
Yes, it's churchesthatheal.com. And if you're a pastor or a staff member, I would just say, get this for your church. Not only is it all the whole program that you need, from the big screen community-wide city event to the pastor's retreat, where I take you and your staff through a retreat, all the way to the individuals and the work they can be doing or a small group can be doing. But also there's, I want to say 30 or 40 training videos on there on pastoral leadership in this area. What do you do with a depressed person? What do you do when somebody's addicted? What do you do with anxiety? Hiring and firing. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff on there. And then if you're not a pastor, what I would encourage you to do is gift this to your church. Gift it to your pastor. Say, you know what? I've been thinking about you, and I know you're dealing with all this stuff and staff and people and maybe even yourself, and I'm thinking about you, and here's your gift. And
there's a lot of economic need out there. There's a lot of, but most, in my experience, most economic needs are actually just an outgrowth of a psychological need. Most basic economic needs can get met. And I think if you're listening today, you'd be crazy not to go find churchesthatheal.com, because it is maybe the evangelistic opportunity for the next 20 years is to reach out. People have been shell shocked for the last 6-7 weeks, and for who knows how much longer. So I definitely look at churchesthatheal.com. Hey, Henry, before we go, so one of the more fascinating, I sensed a shift a week or two ago so we started with, to wash my hands, I do the doxology if I'm Presbyterian, or I sing happy birthday if I don't go to church. And Tony said, okay, so how do I wash my hands? To stay at home. Oh,
I've got a buddy that's the CEO of a public company in Palo Alto, and so he'd have their annual Christmas party, and one year he announced it as a Christmas party, and he got a bunch of hate mail about don't force your religion on me and all this. And so the next Christmas, he stands up there and he said, okay, he said, I call it a Christmas party. He said, it is Christmas. He said, but I want to make it cool for everybody. So if you are somebody celebrates Christmas, in that corner, we have a Christmas tree. If you're Buddhist, we got a Buddha over here. If you're whatever it is, we got that. He said, and over in this corner, for all you atheists, it's empty. I thought that was a great way of including everybody.
Oh, wow. Well, so in this evolution of quarantine, I think people are starting to look now at how do we reopen? What are we looking at? And so we have reopeningchurch.com and reopeningschool.com, and there are lots of conversations that are going on there.
That was a great idea, by the way, just to get everybody A, thinking about it, but B, pooling their
thoughts. I'm not smart enough to know the answer, but I learned something valuable a long time ago. If you plan the party, you get to attend the party. So,
well, but it's, I do want to kind of highlight this though, what you're doing there, because I remember in 2008, in the financial crisis, and I was working with the Wall Street firms, and one of the things we saw with financial advisors who were really thriving and actually did really well through it and after, was they did exactly that. What they did was they would call, like 4 or 5 of their, significant net worth clients that own businesses or whatever. And they started doing little dinner gatherings of think tanks, and they brought those business owners together just as a financial advisor, not for an investment, but I figured, I know all of you, and I'm going to connect you together because you're all learning something that the other one could learn or needs to know, and at least we can share our pain. And creating these communities of how do we go forward, with pastors and business people and coming together so the tribe can pool its gifts, it's really, really important.
Well, we're trying to figure it out, and one thing I'm realizing is nobody has it figured out. And so I'm just wondering, as a final word, or
I had a doctor's appointment this morning with telemedicine, right? And I'm talking to my doctor, and she goes, what, we're all trying to figure this out. We don't know.
Yeah.
I go, you're my doctor. She goes, exactly. We're trying to figure it out.
I had a Zoom call with I won't name them, but 7 or 8 of the most brilliant pastors in the country. And I'm like, want to get y'all on the phone to see what you're thinking about how we're going to get out open again. And all were like, well, I got on the call so I could hear what you thought we'd do about getting open now. I thought you'd tell me. Well, I thought so we're all kind of, so the question that I've been chewing on lately is, when you can't see the future, how do you live in the present? Right. So you got any off the cuff, I'm hitting you with a big question on the fly, but like, when you can't see 5 steps in front of you, how do you lead sanely through the next step or 2?
Well, one of the things that leaders always have to do, and I think this really, really applies now, is you have to live in 2 worlds. Okay. There is a today, you got to stabilize the ship. All right. You're leading something and it's cracking and it's taking on water right now. And you got to figure out what percentage of my time and energy needs to be looking at today and what we got to do today. All right. But also, you're the only one that really is charged with the stewardship of defining the future. and what you're going to look like in the future. So you've also got to make some time to think about this very question. And I think you do that in community, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But a couple of guiding principles. One is, ask yourselves this: what is it that no matter what the circumstance, what is it about us and what we do that will never change? Okay? Our DNA, the message, who we're called to, whatever it is. All right. Wow. Now think about that DNA that will not change. All right. But what is it about the way we've been doing it that may not work tomorrow? And that will give you a real entrance into how can we take what we don't want to change into whatever the new thing is. Okay, so when you think about that, there are some things you don't want to change. Okay, we don't want, music to go away.
Right.
But you don't want to be borders either, right? What they should have been thinking, I'm an author, and if you had told me Borders wouldn't exist at one point, I said, you're crazy. It's Borders and Barnes & Noble. That's what we do, right? But if they had figured out, what do? We get, what's never going to change is people have a need to read.
Yeah.
There is content. We sit in between those two parties. What's not going to change is we need to get content to people who want content. Mm-hmm. If they had thought that way, then they would have realized brick and mortar stores aren't the way that's going to work anymore. They could have continued in business like other people have done. Same thing in the music industry and other places. So you got to figure out what's not going to change. People are lost. That's not going away. People are broken. People are suffering. People want to thrive. People need to know God's ways of doing life. People are hungry. People are all this stuff, right? Get it down to the essence and say, okay, we used to do those things this way. Brick and mortar may not be the total answer anymore. But what is going to be? And then you're going to come up with it. You'll figure this out. God will lead you. But you got to hold some of these choir robes loosely. Because,
I'll tell you, Henry, one of the things I've really struggled with, and I think God's teaching me, is get clear on what you're doing, but then what's coming next and how do you modify to what? I think I've been looking too far down the road. Well, what things going to be like in 10 years? Well, I don't know what things going to be like in 3 months.
That's right.
And I think what God's been
teaching. We don't even know really at the end of this month what it's going to look like.
Well, by the time we finish taping this will all be irrelevant content. So,
That's right.
So, but I think the verse that God's put in my mind lately, as I think about prophets and how they read the future or whatever, is when David said, the word is a lamp to my feet. And I think I used to think it was like a xenon headlight bulb in a Mercedes that go a mile down the road. And he was really only talking about the very next step.
It's so true. So true.
And
you know what? And that doesn't keep people from understanding my very next step may be to equip the body to handle the 10,000 new people we're going to have 30 days from now or 90 days from now.
Right.
See, your next step is about the activities that you can do today. It may be for 5 years from now or whatever, but you can't live. Jesus said in Matthew 6, all you can do is today.
It's got enough trouble.
And today's activities might apply to tomorrow. And if, that's what great visionaries do. But if you don't get busy about doing the next step that God puts in front of you now, then you're just going to fall down a black hole.
So good. That's so good.
And remember the 12 spies that he sent to look over into the promised land.
Yes.
10 of them came back, oh, it's too hard. We'll never do this. And Joshua and Caleb
We were
said,
just grasshoppers.
let's go. Yeah.
Yeah, we were just grasshoppers. They even said we were grasshoppers. They didn't say anything to them. Yeah. Oh, it's so good, man. I appreciate you and appreciate this. And if you're thinking, I believe that the leaders that I'm talking to that are planning the best for what's next and how to open are just thinking 1 or 2 steps ahead. And like a lot of them are saying, okay, well, I'm gonna get my groups of 10 ready because that's gonna be, and I'm gonna have people watch online in groups of 10, and then they're gonna have 4 other groups that are ready, so they can meet together as 50, and then we're gonna from there we'll be ready to. So they're just thinking 1 step ahead at a time. And I think if you're smart and you're watching today, you can't think even 1 step ahead without thinking about how hurting your people are mentally and how much pain there is right now. It is not good that we be alone, and how much churches that heal will help begin a new mission for your church that will bear real fruit. So Henry, I know that sounded like an infomercial. Sorry about that, but I've just got a real fire about it, and I want the word to get out. So appreciate you. And I got you can send me a bill. I guess I got an hour of counseling out of this. I'm gonna pass it on to my
friends. Well, I may need to hire somebody sometime. I'll call your search firm.
Thanks, Henry. And thanks everybody for listening.
It's good to be with y'all.
You too.